It's a place.
All right, ready? If you're ready.
Call meeting order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, be with us this evening as we do the business for the city and the community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
This is item C, approval of agenda. So this is the approval agenda for today, March 13, 2023, regular planning commission meeting.
I move to approve the agenda for March 13, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Item D, citizens' comments. At this point, we will allow anyone to speak for 3 minutes. They must state their first and last name, where they reside, and it's 3 minutes only. So, Mr. Chair, if you want, you can open citizens' comments.
Open citizens' comments.
I'll do this time. I'm sure you're tired of me.
No. Mr. Chair, at this point, if you want, you can close citizens' comments.
Okay, we will close citizens' comments.
Very good. Item E, this is approval of minutes. So this is to approve the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes from February 13th, 2023. We discussed a rezoning case 321 North Pine, which is zone 22-A. We voted on chair and vice chair, saw a site plan for Success Bar and Pickleball Courts, and approved the Goddard City Center Edition preliminary plat.
Move the approval of minutes from February 13, 2023.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Very good. Item F, Board of Zoning Appeals, there is none. Item G, Old Business, there is none. Item H, New Business. So this is item H1, discussion about duplexes. So Goddard has been experiencing significant residential growth, and with that growth comes a variety of housing types. Some of those housing types include two-family dwellings, which commonly come in the form of duplexes. The request for developers to build duplexes has increased over the years and has led to many questions about being asked by citizens, the Planning Commission, and the City Council. On February 13, 2023, the Planning Commission requested that at the next regular Planning Commission meeting, an agenda item be added to include discussion about duplexes. This agenda item will be received and filed with no action taken. So Article 2.102, definition. So this is the different definitions of dwellings under the subdivision regulations. Defines what a dwelling is, what an attached dwelling is, what a dwelling that's detached, what a dwelling that's multifamily, a single-family dwelling, and a two-family dwelling. So for the most part, we're going to be looking at two-family dwellings, which is typically going to be a twin home or a duplex. So these are different housing varieties. Over here you see your single-family detached, traditional home, that's 1 unit. We have a duplex over here, which is 2 units. If it was split down the middle and there was enough lot to create 2 separate lots, then it would be a twin home. Over here we have apartments, we have condos over here. These are row homes, shared walls, row homes over here, and this is a threeplex, 1, 2, 3 units over there. Financially none, legally none. So at this point we are simply talking and discussing about duplexes. I will mention that Shane Grafton was not able to make it, but he texted me and said it was his opinion. He thinks that we should stop approving duplexes until the ones that have already been approved move further along. That was an opinion of Shane Grafton. So at this point, it's just open discussion.
I feel like we've approved plenty of the new developments. You know, we have approved plenty of duplexes, and like Shane had brought up, and you know, many citizens have brought up. Once all these are built, then you know we're going to have a sufficient amount of duplexes. Like if we keep bringing in duplexes to new developments, we're not going to have single-family home developments. But that being said, I think we could put multifamily dwellings in. I think we've had conversations with the City Council before about confining it to a development area instead of just spreading it out all over the place.
How many doors do we have, Micah?
Right now we have 42 duplexes that are built.
So that's 84 doors, or just that 42 doors?
So that's 84.
Okay.
84 units. 42 duplexes.
How many are approved?
There's 42 that are existing that are actually have people inside of them right now, and then if everything that was approved came online, we'd have about 420. So 840.
10% of them have been,
Mhm. Well, some of them were pre-existing. You have South Street had some
Okay.
duplexes, and you had some in Hopper Edition. So, but some of the newer ones would be there's 22 that were built specifically over there in Martin's Court off of for Cloverleaf.
for Cloverleaf.
Mm-hmm.
So the 23rd and 215th hasn't started yet?
No, it hasn't started yet. The construction's underway, but it's going to be a while before
Yeah,
it's going.
okay. Okay.
The first phase is a big phase at 125 lots. I can't say definitively out of 125 lots how many of them are going to be duplex lots. I'd have to go back and look at the plat, but I'm not sure how long it'll take. That's a big phase.
No, I just couldn't remember. And then what's the word on the street for the Maple between 167th and 183rd?
So that one was 155 duplexes and 24 single
Single
family.
family, and it doesn't look like any action's really been.
The action part, and this is where it kind of, there's always going to be a delay between what planning commission sees and when it's actually built and existing, because you're going to have somebody who brings a preliminary plat, and then they do the preliminary plat, and then they bring the final plat, and then they finalize all the engineering, and then they take it to city council, and there's a final plat for city council, and that's when everything has to be approved and finalized. And then they come out with a Mylar, and you guys typically don't see them, some of you might have seen a Mylar before, but the Mylar is that long plastic sheet where if you're the chair of the planning commission, you come and you sign it, I sign it, the city attorney signs it, the mayor signs it, you know, a bunch of other people sign it, and that gets recorded with the county. Once the Mylar gets recorded, then the engineering firm, sometimes even before it gets recorded in terms of actually being filed with the county, they'll send us petitions. And those petitions are what turn into specials on your properties. Those are the petitions that say, oh, it's going to cost $6 million for streets, grading, stormwater, sewer, and all that. And the bigger the phase, the longer it takes before those actual houses go in. Because we always, as a city, kind of by default, because we've run into this problem before, you have contractors that are putting in improvements, and you have contractors that are building homes, and they don't mesh well. So those contractors that are putting in brand new streets, if you have a home builder come in and drive over those brand new streets, they're going to be upset. And so what we do is we say nobody's allowed to come in here and build homes until all the improvements have been inspected by the city engineer and approved where we're receiving them. And then they can go in and start building on those lots. So by the time you actually get to a home starting to come up, it can be 12 months.
Okay.
So it's going to be a year, like you approve a plat and you're like, where's the duplexes and the homes? It can be a year before they actually go up.
But he is still moving forward, I guess that was my,
Oh, yeah,
that was
for
my
sure.
real question. I should just ask
Yes,
my question. Okay.
yes. And in that one in particular, they had to drop 10 duplexes off because the easements weren't fitting, so they had to drop some of them. But other than that, the Mylar is about to be recorded. It's about to hit our office where we sign off on it, and then it's going to be recorded. And then we would see petitions. And then it's off to the engineering again. It takes a while for
Yes.
the home to get built. Entitlement costs a lot of money, so.
But
that's-
between those two developments, we're easily, could be 6 months or more before we see doors.
Yes, it'll be a while. It'll be a while.
Which I guess, my comment then would be the same as what Doug said and what Shane had said as well.
Mhm.
I mean, we have a lot of doors that are available that we haven't even seen yet, so we don't know what the success rate of those is going to be. So I don't know. I know we can't stop them from happening, but it'd be nice to figure out a way to slow them down.
Yeah, and that's a question that's going to have to be asked amongst the planning commission, like, what would you guys want to see? And then also city council has to weigh in on that. And, you know, it's difficult to say if we want to have a joint workshop or not. Maybe they do. We have to kind of approach that question again. Should there be a joint workshop? It's possible that 3 council members might not be here by the end of, by the beginning of 2020.
Sure.
So what does that look like? Because then you have to start all over and have another workshop with the new council members. Because that'd be a brand new majority of the council.
Right.
So it's
But-
difficult sometimes though.
I guess it would, in my opinion, it would be constructive, because if they're adamantly for them and we're adamantly against them, other than requiring them to have a supermajority or something like that, if we disagree and they approve them all, we might as well refocus our efforts to minimizing them or asking for, you know, a
Mhm.
50-50 split or a 60-40 like we've been doing. So I think it would be in our best interest to have that conversation, even if it is once now and once again in the spring with the new, just because if we wait till next February or next March, there could be a lot that happens between now and then,
Yeah,
potentially. And if we don't, I mean, it would be nice to have some direction on what this group would want to say in relation to that. I guess that's the way I feel about it. Because we can debate it all day, but if city council likes it, they're going to move forward.
Right, and also it's difficult for a developer because, for example, it was a 6-1 motion in favor of one duplex on 321 Pine, and then it went to council and it was denied. So, but of course, you guys voted against 167 and 23rd, and then it was approved. And so obviously there's that confusion of what does, because you have 12 people, you have 7 planning commissioners and 5, council members. What do you guys all want to see collectively for the city moving forward? And you can always hear opinions from different people and individuals about where they should go and what does that mean and what quality are they and everything else. And so, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's 12 individuals that are guiding the city as the body to move forward. And what do you guys want to see collectively? Where is there overlap and where is there cohesion? If there's differences, maybe they should be vetted out and either put aside or where there's an overlap, like I said, there should be cohesion around that. If you wanted to see an 80-20 and only an 80-20, that would make my job a lot easier, because then when a developer asks me, I'm saying, they said 80-20. So that way there's no ambiguity. And then the rezoning doesn't have to be such a combative process, because everybody knows what everybody wants to see, at least initially. But then, of course, the changeover, that might change. But that would just have to be something you have to address again in the new year.
But I think it's a worthwhile discussion, either way.
Absolutely.
Even if it's twice.
Let me see if I can bring it up.
Okay.
See what they say.
Sure.
I'm not gonna apologize. No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I guess you can't tell a developer we're not allowing any more duplexes within the city.
No, I can't say that.
But you can tell them we're only allowing 1% or 2% or 5%.
If there was a collective understanding, because if the planning commission says we're only doing 20%, but the city council says 40%, I'm still left not sure what to tell somebody. I don't know what to say.
So in other words, you need something concrete and ready.
Or at least a direction that's collectively agreed upon by the planning commission and city council in the same room during a workshop, where they say, we think it's best to do a 60-40, or we believe it's best to do 80-20, or we believe it's best to do a moratorium. Whatever they want to see. So that way, at least I can give direction to the developers. And this is not
Right. Yeah.
That's pretty typical.
And I also think from the perspective of us, that group of 12, it makes us look a little more,
Cohesive.
yeah, it's cohesive if we have similar thoughts. So I
Yeah.
think that's another reason why I think it would be worthwhile.
Yeah. I think that's definitely helpful. And like I said, it helps relieve the stress of the developer, because they incur a lot of cost up front, because they hire an engineering firm and that whole time that the engineering firm is acting on their behalf, they're getting charged for that. So ultimately, if the project fails, they just lost $50,000.
Sure.
So to be upfront about what the city wants to see would certainly save them a lot of stress. Entitlements is the most challenging part of a developer's life, and so we try to make that either a smooth process through collective understanding, or if we want to make it difficult on them for any particular reason, then we just discuss that as well. But ultimately, it's what you guys want to see and then what council wants to see. And then that overlap, we rally around. You had a question about that?
Yeah, and I know you've talked about this before, and I apologize. You were talking about like population growth
Mhm.
and that. I mean, so what are we looking at there? I mean, over the next, let's say 12, 18, 24 months.
24 months, that's difficult to, and maybe somebody wants to weigh in from the construction side, but from what I understand is that homes used to be 10 to 12 months to be built, now they're more like 7 to 8 months, and so the time is actually sped up. We had that intense, when rates dropped, very low rates, everyone wanted to buy a home and everyone wanted to sell their home, and so all of a sudden it took 12 months to build a house. Well, as soon as things start to slow down, then all these tradesmen are able to actually, be utilized more effectively, and now they're building homes in 6 to 7 to 8 months, and so there's a faster turnaround. 2 years, we're seeing about 100 building permits a year, assuming that they fill in when they, it takes time. 100 building permits in 1 year doesn't mean that they're all going to be filled in that year. It could mean that the next year they'll be filled in. So I don't know, maybe an additional 300 people over 24 months, maybe. Over the next 7 years, you could double in size from about 5,000 to 10,000. There's, if everything came online tomorrow, which including the apartments that different developers were proposing and everything else, if everything came online tomorrow, we would be around 11,000. That doesn't include the projects that I'm currently in discussion with developers that hasn't been presented yet to the public.
11,000
People.
people.
11,000 people.
And then from a renting a duplex versus, say, purchasing a single-family home, from a monthly payment perspective, I mean, what? Because I mean, if I remember right, rents were somewhere around that 1,500 plus range is what I remember hearing. Maybe from the housing values in Goddard, what are we seeing maybe kind of as an average payment right now? Do you have any concept of what that would be?
Yeah, there's a lot of data out there, and I love that data, so I love to present it to inflict this damage on people, emotionally and psychologically. Yeah, I mean, over the last 20 years, homes have increased dramatically in value. I mean, you tend to see I don't want to give you too much information, it's just too nerdy, but basically home values tend to do this, and then but they tend to track on an upward scale, generally speaking. You'll be up, down, up, down, up, down, but that trend, if you did a trend line, would be a positive trend. And so, yeah, mortgages 20 years ago were about $1,000 a month. Nowadays, they're about $1,800 a month. At 6-7%, there could be $2,000 a month, somewhere around there, depending on the average home value. Which the average home value in Goddard right now, my home is just got valued at $200,000. I bought it for $160 in 2019. Now it's valued at $200,000. March is when the appraisers, do their business, and so that's when you can go on mobile land records really fast and look at your property value and make a determination. And then you can look at comparable properties too to see how they derive that value from. But yeah, $1,800 to $2,000 is the average mortgage in Goddard probably right now. The average mortgage, right? To rent a duplex is somewhere between 12, 13, 14, 1,500. Some of them are 16. So that's kind of why some people would prefer that. Also, there's transitional. When I was giving a presentation on urban economics in Goddard at the Lions Club, I said the reason duplexes, and you start to see more of them, is because people also use them for transitional housing. You sell your house in St. Andrews, you move into a duplex while you're waiting for your other house to be built, and then you move into your other house when it gets built. And if you don't have a duplex to move into, then you rent your neighbors, right? And I believe actually Commissioner Klein, you have a neighbor that you mentioned before that actually has been renting their house for like $1,800 or something like that.
They're renting a 3-bedroom home to 4 guys for $1,750 a month.
Yeah.
And that house built for $71,000.
So that's typically what you see, is that the duplexes fill that renter need, but not just renters in terms of transitional renters from one house to renting to a house again, but also people that are trying to break into the home market in Goddard and they can't. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'd rather pay $1,300 for half of a duplex now and wait until I can afford a mortgage.
Right.
But who knows when rates are going to drop? They're going to go to 4% anytime soon.
Right.
And the biggest commitment's a down payment.
Right.
Right, and that was another.
They rent because they don't have 20%.
And that was another thing that we noticed, was that from an economic perspective, 20 years ago, 20% down was $27,000. Nowadays, 10% down is $29,000. So 10% down today is more than 20% was 20 years ago. So in terms of saving up for down payment, it's significantly more. Now there's programs, the state has programs that you can apply for. When I got my first home in Spring Hill, it was for a rural residential home loan. So it was 0% down at 5.25 with a PMI. So I still had to do property mortgage insurance. But that was 0% down at 5.25. Now you're lucky if you get 5.25. You know what I mean? That's going to be difficult, even with 10% down, $29,000. And you're going to see that. I mean, depending on obviously the property, but a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, it's probably going to be closer to 380, maybe 400,000. And I'm throwing numbers up there, depending on where you're located.
Sure.
3-bedroom, 2-bath. If it's more like Cloverleaf, might be closer to 250, 280. If it's like Arbor Creek, you're obviously going to be paying for that community center. So you're going to be paying $350 on that. And the lots are more expensive because they have to offset the cost of the community center.
Sure.
Obviously petitions go up, one square, one linear foot of water line was 25, and then it goes up to be 35, then it's 40, then it's 45, then it's 50. And those petitions, when they get spread amongst all the lots, and so the costs are more. So $1 million of water line 2 years ago is now 1.5 million that gets spread across the lots. So lots start to get smaller because you have to spread that cost. The developer doesn't want to, they don't want to eat too much of a cost. They want to keep their costs, their specials low. The 200 a month is non-existent anymore. They used to be like, 180 a month, that's high for a developer. Then it was 200, and they're like, well, we don't want to go any higher than 200 a month on specials. And now they're pushing 220, and they're like, okay, we need to put more lots in here. And then it's like 250, and they're like, oh, we need to buy more land, And so this is where these it's just really about numbers, really. It's what it really comes down to. That's why it's kind of interesting. If we can do any infill development where there's no specials, it becomes easier for us. But that can become difficult. Because
Yeah, but then your price of your lot just goes up that much more.
What's that?
If there's no special.
Oh, absolutely. No, if for example, I don't know if I should be mentioning all of this stuff. But anyway, some of the developments, we'll just leave them nameless. Some developments that were privately installed infrastructure, you see that the costs are much higher. So let's see about that. I don't want to call out different developers and, they should be doing it differently or something like that, but it's just different developments. If it's privately installed infrastructure, where there's no specials, as Commissioner Klein said, that lot is going to go from $14,000 to $50,000. So it's a lot more. Now, whether or not you want to finance that up front, with a 30-year loan, you're financing that lot no matter what. You're paying for that.
Right.
You either do it with your loan through your escrow, with property tax. Well, actually, it's through the principal and interest, but or you do it through specials, which drop off in 14 years or 20 years, depending on it. So it just depends how you want to look at it. You're either going to be paying it through your escrow and specials or through the principal and interest on the lot.
Right.
But I can recoup my principal and interest.
You could, or you could pay it off faster, but
I can't recoup my specials.
no, you're not going to get that back. You're not going to get that back. But the upfront cost is much lower because cities can borrow $20 million at 4%, where a developer's going to borrow $20 million at 8%. So you're going to get that shock on the front end.
Sure.
Any other thoughts or comments about that?
I think we ought to come up with a percentage that's allowed. That would, because I believe we have enough duplexes right at this moment when they will get in here, get built.
So are you saying percentage per development or?
Yes, percentage per development. I tried that with Overleaf and they shot me down.
Any other thoughts,
How
comments?
would you handle the one-offs?
Excuse me?
If you say we're going to do developments and we're going to say on a percentage of it can be this much, how would you handle like the one-offs where it's a lot and they want to rezone it to be a duplex?
Like 321 North Pine.
Yeah.
I believe that would probably just be on a case-by-case basis, like the one over here on Oak. Was it on Oak?
So on the east side, there with triplex?
No, the one over here that,
It was on Pine.
321 Pine, it's Pine Street.
yeah.
Yeah, because those are going to be based on location and
Or come up and say we have to have a percentage on a new development. That's where you'd get that.
I think that's what you're going to see more of. Infill is kind of rare. Pine Street was, I mean, we do see some people asking about lots in Old Town that are smaller, that haven't been developed in a while. And so there was actually, besides Pine, there was another, a lady who wanted to buy a lot that the city had. It was a bigger lot, it was about 75 by 100, but she wanted to buy it in Old Town, and she wanted to rezone it for a duplex. And so I'm not seeing a lot of people buying lots to build single family in Old Town. And when I say Old Town, I mean north of Santa Fe and south of 54 and west of 199. That's where the concentration of the older housing stock is. I just don't see a lot of people buying lots. That doesn't mean it won't happen. I just don't see a lot of it happening. So, but that might change. I'm not sure. But if rates are high and people can't buy a house, then they're going to rent them. So.
Yeah.
That's where, I like the concept of the percentage. I think it's a good guideline. I'm a little concerned about locking it in real tight, just because back to your point, I think that as market dictates, you know, if single family housing continues to rise and the rents don't stay up with it, you know, I mean, and I think there's gonna have to be a wide spectrum of housing offerings. And so, while I think it's a good guideline, and I agree, I think it's a good discussion to have, and I definitely want to be on the same page, like you're saying, with the city. I don't think it needs to be necessarily something in stone, you know, that we would decide on. It would be, you know, because if there is an influx in population or a decrease, you know, whatever might be happening, and all of a sudden rents change dramatically or housing prices change dramatically, and you know, and the economy changes, you know, rates change, you know, whatever all the factors might be, then I think it's tough to predict the future, I guess, is where I'm at.
Sure.
Well, then you also got to think, okay, what if somebody comes in and buys a quarter section, which is 160 acres, and say, I want to fill it with nothing but duplexes.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. You tell them, well, you can buy it and develop it, but you can't build anything on it.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And I think to Jamie's point earlier, I think it's, you know, city council, that's being on the same page, I think
Yeah.
is the most critical factor of all of it, whatever, you know, that overall vision being similar.
And I think it'd be good if we had that meeting with the city, if they would also talk about what they're doing to keep pace with the growth in population in terms of law enforcement, those kind of things, because we hear that from the public discussion, you know. Oh, if you put in these duplexes, crime's gonna go up. Well, that may be true, but what's the city doing to compensate for that? Because I don't necessarily believe that just because you put in duplexes, that everybody that comes in is gonna be bad.
Sure.
well, I guess we need the meeting with the city council. Talk about the infrastructure. Can we supply water to all these houses? Can we take care of the sewer? I think the water is probably the most important thing. I mean, I know they've talked about a second water tower. Are they gonna need a third one?
It'd be a while before, I don't want to speak out of place. I'm not a city engineer, public works, but we oversized the first water tower. I'm assuming we probably just oversize the second one and then grow into it. But there are discussion about new water tower, pressure pumps for new developments as necessary, water wells and water rights and everything that goes with it. So I think there is some very strong and proactive work being done on that. But it is a very good question. That question has come up before.
It's a very important question, because if you double the population of the city,
Right.
you know,
And I think too, also that strategy of, you know, as we continue to bump into the county at various times, I mean, that one development that we had, that was, you know, there's mostly county people that were here, you know, talking and things, and again, what's that relationship with the county? How do we want to handle that? You know, is there a direction we want to grow from a geographic perspective? You know, this way is better than this way. You know, whatever that might be.
Yeah, that's a lot of really good conversation to have. Obviously, one of the big factors would be rural water district. We always have to compete with rural water district, and so there's certain ways you can grow where you're not going to be competing with them, but they have a big service area. And anytime we do development in that service area, either the developer has to pay so that rural water district will release the rights to service it, or the city would have to incur debt in the form of a bond and assess it as specials to the next development. So it's rural water district it's a very good question about if you're going to grow north, you're going to hit rural water district, east, south. You can grow west in certain areas and not hit them, but they've surrounded us in a very tight circle, and so it's difficult to anticipate how that's going to work,
Right.
which way you want to grow.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, though.
I think it's great. So it just helps us understand better when people approach with new projects, so I think it'd be great.
Yeah, I'll talk to council and see if they want to have a workshop this year. Any other discussion about Okay. Next item would be item H.2, which is discussion about non-conforming lots. So Goddard has subdivision regulations that dictate the built environment from time to time. Reviewing the subdivision regulations help to understand current regulations and how they can be improved moving forward. To help the city grow and protect the existing built environment. Recent conversation about non-conforming lots has come up, which has caused a greater scrutiny of the subdivision regulations by city staff, triggering some interesting questions that should be shared with the planning commission for review and comment. This is a receive and file, no action will be taken on this agenda item. So, non-conforming lots of record. So this is straight out of subdivision regulations under Article 8.101. It defines what a non-conforming lot looks like and what is allowed on it. So you'll notice right over here that it says, notwithstanding the regulations imposed by any other provisions of regulations, a single-family detached dwelling or any type of manufactured mobile home which is permitted by use by the applicable district regulations and complies with the restrictions in section 8101A2 may be located on a lot in the same ownership that is not less than 50 feet in width and with public water and sewer, and that consists entirely of a tract of land that meets the following. So basically this is saying, and when I was reading this, it was interesting because I was looking at it and I was reading this portion over here about construction, which is permitted. And so it's almost as if it's saying, oh, you're allowed to build on a lot that's 50 by 100. As long as it's 50 feet in width, it almost looks like you can build on it. And I emailed the city attorney, Robert Corkinall, who's one of our attorneys, and we kind of went back and forth on this because when I read this, and then I read this about non-conforming structures, it almost seems to conflict. Because you see here that any structure, this is the definition of a non-conforming structure, any structure which is devoted to use, which is permitted by the zoning district in which it is located, but which is located in a lot which does not comply with applicable lot size requirements. And then if you go down to where it's over here, C, it says damage. In the event that any structure described here is damaged by any means except flooding and extent of more than 50% of its fair market value, such structure shall not be restored unless it shall hereby conform. And so I'm saying that seems odd if you're allowing a house to be built on a lot that's 50 foot wide and it's a non-conforming lot, but then if it was burnt or destroyed, you can't rebuild it. And so I went back and forth with the attorney on this, and he's of the impression that this is saying if the house exists, you can rebuild it. And it's almost as if it reads that you can build it, but if it's destroyed, you can't rebuild it. And so this portion right here, he didn't answer. And so I have to kind of follow up with him on there. He's reading it to mean you can, if the house exists and it's damaged, you can rebuild it if it's an existing house. But if the lot exists and it's vacant and there's no home there, you can't build on it. Does that make sense? So a 50 by 100 foot lot, which in the R1 district, the minimum is 60 by 100. So you can imagine 50 on 100 and it's vacant and somebody says, can I build on this? The answer is no, you can't build a single family detached house on a 50 by 100. But if somebody comes to the city and says, I have a lot that's 50 by 100 and there's a house sitting on there and it was damaged in a fire, can I rebuild it? According to the attorney, the answer is yes, you can rebuild it. So this is meant to be a way of protecting older properties, basically, that exist, not to introduce homes on narrow lots that don't exist yet. Does that make sense? It's clear as mud, I understand. And so I'm still going back and forth with the attorney on this because this question came up with 321 North Pine. It's 50 by 140 in an R1 district. So in an R1 district, 50 by 140, you can't technically build there. And that was another thing that came up. There was the perception of confusion during discussions about it because the people were saying, well, how can you build a two-family lot on this, a two-family unit on this lot when you can't build a single family? And the assumption was it was because of the size, but that's not the case. Zoning is like, I gave this analogy, zoning is like a car, right? You can practically drive the car, right? If there's gas in the car and it's got wheels and an engine, you can drive the car just fine, but you technically can't drive it without a driver's license. Our subdivision regulations are like driver's license. You can practically build, but we won't technically allow you to build because it doesn't meet these very specific requirements. And so when you look at some of these lots in Old Town, these are all 50-foot width lots, except for these ones are 25 by 100, but these ones are 50 by 100. All of these are considered non-conforming. There's about 24 of them. 3 of them are vacant. One of them is the one on Pine. These ones over here are vacant. They're probably owned by this individual over here or this one over here, but 321 Pine is one of the only lots that's actually vacant that's non-conforming. The rest of them are non-conforming structures that exist on a 50 by 100 foot lot. And so that's just kind of interesting to think about. So the question would be, if one of these homes burned, according to the attorney, you could rebuild it. But if there's a lot like 321 Pine, you can't build a house on it unless you do the rezoning or unless you change the R1 zoning classification to allow the smallest lot to be 50 by 100. So, as you're aware, lots over time have changed. It used to be that it was 25 by 100 back in the 1900s, and then it became 50 by 100 back in 1950 and 60, and then we said to avoid the whole slum mentality, the whole idea of slums being housing units are close together, you want space, you want air, you want light, you want front yards, side yards, backyards, and so we said, well, we want 75 by 100. And then in 2019, we came back around, we said, we'll make it 60 by 100. And so now the question is, do we want to make it 50 by 100 again, almost like we're going back in time based on market flows? And so that's just kind of something to think about. One way to get around that would be to approve a variance. So you can approve a variance. There's selected things that a variance will allow. You can vary the applicable minimum lot area, lot width, and lot depth requirements. You can vary the applicable bulk regulations, including maximum height and lot coverage and minimum yards requirements. Variances run with the property. So if you had a variance on your house and you sold it, it runs with the house and it runs with the lot. And so it'll just run in perpetuity. I did talk to the attorney too about approving restrictions on variances that will expire, and he said that's acceptable by the Planning Commission. Conditional uses can expire, that's acceptable for the Planning Commission, and so can special uses, but special uses go to the Planning Commission and City Council. So if you approved a special use and you said we want to approve it with a 1-year contingency to expire, and went to City Council and then special use, and you said we want to consider a special use with 1 year, expiring, then City Council can approve it with 1 year and expiring. So that's just something, because that came up during the question about conditional uses that are in the county for boat and RV storage. When we had Philip Ziegenbergen of MAPD here, and he was saying, oh, Wichita approved it with an expiration for 10 years. And we're like, we didn't know that was actually legally acceptable. So we were checking with our attorneys, and they're saying that is legally acceptable. If it comes under the Planning Commission, you guys can approve it, with an expiration on it. It's just something to think about. Variances in this case, typically you're going to be going through all the state statutes of the variance, though, and as you're aware, they can be kind of cumbersome. It has to be unique to the lot, it has to be not inflicting any potential property damage on neighbors and everything else that goes with it. So this is just something to think about. How you want to handle these. What does that mean? This is actually something that Commissioner Klein and I talked about before, about the whole tornado situation. What happens if you have a tornado come through, you smash a bunch of lots? Can they be rebuilt? Can they not be rebuilt? And that's kind of difficult, because when you read this, it says that 50% of its fair market value, such structure shall not be restored. So the city attorney hasn't really addressed this portion yet, so that's what we're trying to figure out. What structure? If this is saying that they can be built, or this is saying that they can't be rebuilt, how does that mean? What does that look like? So, and what does that look like for these guys? Or any other lot that's smaller than that? A lot of old homes and old guys, so. Financially, legally, none. This is just receive and file. What are your guys' thoughts on non-conformity? Do you have any questions about that? 321 Pine came up in particular during the rezoning for the city council because one of the council members asked, can you build a house on it now? And so when I'm reading the code, I'm saying, no, it doesn't look like you can. I mean, a typical lot would be 60 by 100. When I read this, it almost looks like you could. It almost looks like it says that it will be acceptable to build it if construction is permitted. But is construction permitted on a vacant lot? The attorney is saying no, construction is not permitted on a vacant lot if it doesn't conform. It can be rebuilt if it exists. It can't be built if it doesn't exist. So no, it can't be built. So if this house was demolished, sat vacant for a while, somebody came with a building permit and said, I want to build on it, probably say no. If it was demolished in a fire and it was covered under insurance, and they came over and said, can I rebuild it? I would probably say yes. If they pulled a demolition permit, waited a year, came back in a year and said, can I rebuild? I would say no. Now, of course, anybody who's aggrieved by any decision of the community development director can come and appeal before the planning commission, so of course, you guys are welcome to interpret it however you want.
And that would fall under a conditional use permit if it was approved?
You could grant them a variance. You potentially grant them a variance if you felt so inclined. The variances are more difficult than the conditional use permits because they fall under certain requirements from state law that you'd have to follow. But of course, it's subject to interpretation, so you could say, well, it was burnt, they demolished it, they came back a year later, they applied for a building permit, Mike is mean, so he said no. So then they came to the planning commission, Mike is mean to me. And then you guys can say, well, based on this, you could approve a variance and then let them build a house. So, or you can change the R1 zoning to make the minimum lot requirement 50 by 100, which would mean I would go to planning commission, we publish it in the paper, take it to the planning commission, say, hey, do you want to change the lot size requirement to 50 by 100? And then it would have to go to city council for final approval.
We've already got 24 of these lots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these ones actually,
And 3 of them are without anything on them.
yeah, these two are 25 by 100. Most of the 25 by 100 lots were grabbed back in the day, stuck together to make a 50 by 100, and then stuck again to somebody else to make 75 by 100, so they were compiled, and then a house was built on it, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. But there's occasionally you'll find these ones in particular that are all 50 by 100 or 50 by 140 or 50 by whatever. The minimum lot width requirement is 60, and these are all 50-foot width lots, so they're non-conforming. So yeah, if any of these burn, they demolish them, you know,
Tornado.
Natural disaster. It just depends on how gracious you guys feel in your interpretation of the subdivision regulations.
But if we change it to 50 by 100, the next development that comes in, all the lots could be 50 by 100.
That's right, and not only that, but it's very possible that you might see more developments requesting that, because as mentioned, they want to split the specials amongst as many lots as possible. So if it's 50 by 100, in fact, I was in discussion with a developer recently, and he was looking at platting them potentially by 60 by 100. 60 by 100 only became acceptable back in 2019, right after I came on board, and we changed it in March of 2019. So back in 2019, he wouldn't even have been allowed to do a 60 by 100 lot. Easiest things to think about.
Yeah.
And you can't mix zoning for an area specific. Like you couldn't just say we want an R1 zone for this area, which you call Old Town.
You could create your own separate zoning classification, which is not uncommon. In fact, in Hopper Edition, there's R1A. There's also an R1B. You don't see R1B because it's called the floating zoning classification. It's not in use, but R1A is in use. R1A says you can't build in a certain part of Hopper Edition, less than 1,200 square feet. You can't pull a building permit that's less than 1,200 square feet. So in this case, you could create a special zoning classification for that area that says you are allowed to build here on smaller lots with a smaller footprint.
So that would take up all that drama.
Yeah, it could potentially settle that area and not be included in future developments in other areas. That could be an R1C, that could be a special classification, you could call it, you could come up with any particular name that you want, but we've created plenty of new zoning classifications. We created RUI, rural with urban intent, that's a new zoning classification. We came up with the R4 classification, which is a higher density classification. There's plenty of ways that you can address that particular issue. And cities do it all the time. Some cities have 50 zoning classifications, they can become a little more cumbersome, but obviously the more you add, the more you have to interpret. But they create overlay districts too. You can create an overlay district that's not even a zoning classification. It's just a supplemental criteria that overlays on top of the zoning classification. So.
I really want to call it R-MICA just because you keep bringing more and more stuff.
Oh my goodness, this is a lot. So
But that makes complete sense though.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't want to, we wouldn't want the lots to sit empty.
Right.
I mean, you know,
Or damage.
right. Knock on wood, you know, nothing happens to the ones that have,
Or become a landfill.
but something will happen and we'll be in that situation and we'll have to address it. I mean,
For
I would
example,
agree
here's
with
another example of going to that. Back in 2019, Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit for a duplex off of 3rd Street. If you remember that, off of 3rd Street and Goddard Road. It used to be a 2-story White House that was abandoned. Well, the tenant got evicted basically. There was mold, and so the property owner had to demolish it. Well, he still hasn't built anything yet. Thankfully, he got a conditional use permit so it can run with the property forever. You know, it's not going to go away. But hypothetically, if he demolished it and that lot was too small and he waited, he still hasn't built, and he came now to pull a building permit, and the lot was too small, hypothetically, if the lot was too small, we could say, no, you can't build there, it's too small.
or we're forced to do something.
A variance, an
Something,
overlay,
right.
something else, yeah.
Yeah.
The easiest way for you to handle a case by case would be a variance. To cover all of them at one go would be, a new overlay district, a new zoning classification, something of that nature. But if it's just on a case by case and you didn't want to handle just all of them at once, then you would do a variance potentially.
Well, let's assume the attorney would come back and agree, because I think it sounded like there was still some debate on if a
Yes.
disaster happens.
I like to debate attorneys, it's fun.
Yeah.
How do you read this?
Right. But let's assume that would be the case.
Mhm.
What's the unintended consequence of just changing that piece of saying, if there is some kind of, fire, tornado, et cetera, you could build back in that
Yes.
non-conforming lot?
So you could add some additional language in there, just add more language. Of course, that's a change to the subdivision regulations. It means we have to publish it, wait 20 days, send it, publish it in the city newspaper, wait 20 days, bring it to planning commission, and then bring it to city council. And if city council is amenable to the idea of changing, adding additional language, then they could approve it, and then we would publish it as an ordinance, and then it would officially be changed 30 days later after it's been officially published. You could do it that way too. Just make it abundantly clear what's
Right.
acceptable.
Yeah.
Typically what you see is, back in the earlier 1900s, there was a gentleman named Robert Merton. He came up with this whole idea of unintended consequences. You adopt one policy, you think it's great, and then there's the spin-off policies that come out of it that just spin out. And it can be positive, it can be negative, and it can be what he calls a perverse consequence, where you're trying to fix something and it becomes much worse, right? So there's all these situations that come in when you change or amend subdivision regulations where you're trying to look into the future and see what is going to happen here. If we change this language just slightly, how's somebody else down the road going to interpret it,
Right.
and how is that going to spin out? How could it spin out? It's just difficult. Obviously, housing is not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous, which means, of course, that it's unique in every single house, even though they call them cookie cutters, they're unique slightly in slightly different ways, and things can change, and so it's like you're trying to wrestle with the past and try to figure out and make it comply with the present, and it's very difficult, so that's why you guys are here.
So how do we go about fixing this?
Oh, just however you guys think you would want to fix it. Obviously, this is just receiving file, so just something that we will want to continue to discuss. But there's one lot in particular, obviously, that's going to sit empty for a long time if we don't consider how we want to move forward with it. That's Mr. Kirk Richards' lot. So just kind of how we want to handle that. I am talking to him about what his options are and trying to figure that out. But
No, I would be all for a special zoning. I think that was a great thought there.
I get one a year.
One a month. It would take all of them but the 25 footers. And those are a special case anyway.
yeah, 25 it's awfully. That's like a California lot. My parents, when they bought their house in California, it was 25 by 100. And they bought the house, they bought the lot next to it, and they combined it to make it separate.
It seems to me like they're gonna have to come here and really sell what they're gonna try to do with it anyway. So,
Yeah, it would be difficult.
I think those would be special use, but the other 22 lots we might as well encompass in the zone.
Yeah, there's something we could consider. It's not uncommon for cities to have special overlay districts or zoning classifications for downtown areas that have older lots. So it's definitely something to be considered. Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, what would be the steps to make that, to get to the point of a motion approval, like?
Basically, I would draft a new zoning classification for downtown between a certain area. I would present it to planning commission first, just to kind of look at it. How does it look? Do you guys think this is what you're looking for? And then we would present it to city council to see if that's what they were looking for, if they think it makes sense. And then we can either do that, or we would start off right away by publishing it in the city newspaper that we're considering a new zoning classification. And then I would bring it to planning commission, but we'd have to wait 20 days. And then we bring it to planning commission and say, hey, is this what you think? Is this what you want to see? Do you want to change it? And then if you guys say, yes, we do, or no, we don't, or we want to see more changes, then we would change it again and bring it back to you guys. And once you were happy with it, then we would present it to city council, and they would say, well, we want to change it, or we want to see something different. Then we would amend it, we would bring it back to city council, and they say, okay, now we're happy with the zoning classification. And then we would publish an ordinance and make it official. So we can always kick it off by publishing something in the city newspaper saying we're considering looking at a new zoning classification. And then we start the design process. And we can, once we publish it in the city newspaper and have the meeting, make it public, and that it's official, you don't have to have another meeting. You don't have to publish it again and again and again and again. And again. So just a reconsideration at that point. Is that something you think you'd want to consider?
I would, so.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
And under the assumption we're at least 60 to 90 days out from this potential meeting, that might be a great place to talk about it, if that's possible.
Are you talking about the workshop?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what council wants to do.
I just meant we could, then it's not back and forth, we could just potentially agree on what we wanted it to say, but.
Sure.
Just as a thought.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see if council wants to do a workshop and
Yeah.
when that can actually be accomplished. Obviously, there's a lot of projects coming up, so but if we can make that happen, we'll see what we do. Any other?
There's more of us than there are of them.
You're like Thunderdome. Do you have any other questions about nonconformity on this particular? There's also other types of nonconformity, like nonconforming uses, but we don't really need to talk about that. That's like if you have, it'd be like if you had a house in an industrial district. It's completely different than what we're particularly looking at downtown. Thoughts?
Micah, can I squeeze in?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Mind if I
You can step
say a
in.
few words, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission, kind of buttoning your guys' meeting, but I was watching on the phone trying to get over here. On the duplexes, I'm gonna start showing up to more of your guys' meetings just so we can cut through some of the back and forth, it takes forever to get anything done. But one of the things that was brought up was the percentage on duplexes. I think you brought it up, Mr. Klein. I think that's actually a really good idea. One of the problems that we're having right now is from this bench to our bench is where does the council stand and where does the city of Goddard stand? Developers don't know when they come into Goddard what direction the city is going to stand. Sometimes we differ, which that's fine, it's government. But we need to have a plan in place where, okay, if it's 40% or 30%, they know. Because then that's going to determine if they want to actually come to Goddard or not. And so having something in place where you guys discuss that, you guys feel comfortable, it would make future growth easier. One thing that I've discussed with the city staff is coming up with a formal plan for each and every development. Right now, and in the past, the city has operated pretty much just shooting from the hip. Each development that comes in, it's always different. And which is understandable to some extent because each development is slightly different. Goddard's very flat, just like the rest of Kansas is. We need lift stations and sewer mains to service a lot of these developments, and that kind of varies. But we need a structure because when all of you guys leave, when I leave, city councils change, we need to know that the city is going to have the same process every single time, just like a business. You know, the plant manager dies, you know that the employees are still going to show up to work every day, and the company's going to still keep running. And so we need to change that. And I've already discussed that with the city staff. As far as the zoning for Old Goddard, I think you're completely right. Having an actual district that pertains to those old lots in Goddard is probably the best. It's clean cut. You say, hey, this is what we're going to allow in this area. And then if you kind of do your remarks, well, could you change the verbiage of that code? If you did that, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but if you did that, it could lead to other things. You know, what happens if somebody interprets it differently and the seasons, if their house burns down, could they squeeze in, you know, whatever. You never know what you're going to end up. But if you draw a district, you know exactly where you're at. There's no change in anything. So I think you guys are on the right track with that. Is there any questions from you guys that you might have to me? Anything? Where you think we might be standing? Where you're concerned what we might be standing? Anything?
I believe we'll have a joint meeting and discuss all that stuff and come up with a plan.
Okay. One of my things that I don't want to see happen is, and I've seen it with the sign ordinance, we toss things back and forth and back and forth. We'll kick it back to you guys, you'll kick it back to us. And so one thing I want to do is be able to show up to these meetings, hear you guys out, and then I can also try to talk in the next council meeting. Hey, Micah does a pretty good job with that already. But cut through, I have no problem having a meeting, I think that's great. But then we can also kind of cut through some of the noise. So, anything else? Alan?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, sir. All righty. No more questions about nonconformity? All right, so staff report. So, quick background of the governing body appointed Terry Lamont, Matt Lawn, and Micah Scott, and me myself as interim administrators to delegate the day-to-day operations until new city administrator is hired. City Council approved the request for proposals for hiring a headhunter firm to begin the process of locating a new city administrator. They will also host an open meeting at 6 p.m. on Monday, March 20th to solicit comments about what the next administrator's role should be and how this role should function. The city is currently interviewing for code enforcement and building inspector position, and several qualified applicants have applied. We're hoping to fill this position before the end of March. Is there any questions about that portion of it?
What's the format of the open meeting on the 20th? If you're going to solicit comments, is it like this, where you get up and you speak for 3 minutes?
I don't know. Do we have an idea what will the format of the March 20th 6 p.m. look like? We're soliciting comments. Are we just going to leave it kind of open and let people talk, do you think, or first and last name and where they reside? And
Here lately, in the past, we have kind of regulated it. I've tried to steer away from regulating it. I think the community wants to have more say in the meetings. So here lately, Terry's been yelling at me for letting people in the audience talk. I'm kind of even breaking the rules right now as well. But that's kind of just for right now with the circumstances that we're in. The community's wanting their voices heard. And I think the more communication we have right now, the better. So as a chairperson or the mayor, you're going to have to manage that as you see fit in the meetings. I recommend to you, if you have people who want to speak, express their concerns, you let them do it. You let them do it freely, at least for the next few months. I think people want to be heard right now. And I know it's tough when you're trying to run a meeting at the same time. Huh?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the community has a lot of questions on what's going on here in Goddard. And, I appreciate you coming here. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we need to, as a planning commission, as a city council, need to clear that up, and we need to communicate better amongst each other. And and fix whatever's happened in the past, so. And I'm not afraid of fixing it however I see fit too, so I mean, sometimes we always need to make tough decisions, and I think the council's proven that we can make tough decisions, so. You know, I think you guys handle it well, but I recommend to you, let the community talk for, you know, and manage it from there. So. All right? You're back up.
Okay. Questions about any of this? I'm hoping to hopefully fill that position for building inspector and code enforcement relatively soon, so that I can focus just on economic development and planning and zoning, because we're going to see a lot more projects. I mean, we've already seen a lot of projects, but we'll see a lot more projects, and so just continuing that into the future. Item J, planning commissioner comments.
Everything on the side?
Nope.
It's good information.
To adjourn.
Yeah.
All second?
All fair?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much.